This is a long story, as it's been over 5 years in the making. I've actually talked about this story before, but there are some really good internet sleuths here on Reddit, and they were able to figure out ex-beauty queen's identity and mine too. I don't really care if I give it my identity, but I don't want it to be on my actual account, so I deleted it a while back. The catalyst for me to repost it today on a throwaway is that it's cathartic. Last week, yet another court date for ex-beauty queen stalker came and went. We had been expecting things to proceed with her entering a plea of guilty, or not guilty, but no such luck. All we got was another vague reason as to why she's not ready and a new court date issued, months from now. There have been many court dates since she has been arrested. It's been over 18 months since she had been arrested for continued stalking and harassment, and she still wants to drag things on, to seemingly try and stay relevant in our lives. As an aside, the amount of court resources and taxpayers' money that's wasted is actually really astounding. Anyway, onto the story. To recap, my husband dated a beauty queen, title holder of a well-known pageant before me. They broke up long before we met. She was a statuesque blonde, very tall and a knockout in her day in my opinion. This is somewhat important to the story, I guess. But while she was a dazzling pageant winner on the outside, on the inside, oh boy, she could be charming and beautiful if she needed to. But mostly, she treated people around her terribly, including my husband, and he eventually broke it off with her. But she never went away. She would continue to call and email repeatedly, even after my husband and I had met. If anything, her calls increased. She would call over and over again, day and night, even after my husband, then boyfriend, had blocked her number. She would ask for money, and threatened to go to the police, claiming that he had hurt her if he didn't give it to her. He obviously didn't give her the money, and this made her very upset. The threats increased and became more malicious, but when that didn't work, she would switch up tactics and try and sweetly ask him for help with certain projects she was trying to get up off the ground, or more accurately, have him do the work for her and she'd take the credit, with the promise that, if he did just this last thing for her, she would go away. He didn't reply. She would go back to being malicious then. Any tactic for attention, or for what she really wanted, money. My husband was terrified, because of course, while he never did anything to her, it would be her word over his, and he was terrified of ruining his reputation and career. We unfortunately ended up at an event that she also attended. She had been waiting for us to arrive and had placed herself near the entrance of the event. As we walked in, she stood across the room, looking me up and down, laughing and whispering into the ear of her date, making a point to try and make me uncomfortable. But that was okay. She was easily ignored until she had ambushed me as I came out of the bathroom. She had clearly been waiting for a moment that I was alone. She towered over me. She is very tall, and I had no intention of having it out with her. And as I hurriedly walked to find my husband, she kept pace beside me, hunched over. So she was at my eye level. I'm 5'5". Her head turned towards me. She was like a caricature of herself as she ambled beside me, smiling crazily. "Where's your man?" she hissed in her heavy accent. Her eyes were black. She looked like she was out of a Tim Burton movie, hunched over with that crazy demonic smile. "Watch your back, Pug," she added, grinning. She liked to call me names like Pug because I own pugs, and I guess she thought it was an insult. What I didn't know then was, while I was in the bathroom, she had walked over to my husband and had thrown her arm around him while he was in mid-conversation with someone, and introduced herself to the man he was talking to, as if she and my husband were together. My husband unwrapped himself from her clutches and told her to beat it, She then beelined and waited for me to come out of the washroom. We stopped going to the parties after that. The last time that we ran into her was at a funeral for a mutual friend. She followed me around at the wake. As my husband, boyfriend at the time, was talking to the man's widow, I was talking to a friend and his wife. She walked right up and stood with us, joining us mid-conversation as if she were a part of the group. It was unnerving but also just bizarre. It was a funeral and I didn't want a scene. I silently picked my wine glass off the bar and walked away, leaving her with the couple that I had been speaking to, and her staring at me with a smirk on her face. All in all, it was annoying but still manageable. However, the emails, calls, and everything never stopped. She would call my husband over and over day and night, even though he had long blocked her number. She would drive by. I found my car keyed one night after I left it outside, but obviously I couldn't prove that it was her. But enough was enough. My husband had a lawyer send a cease and desist. After the first, she had called him from a private number. He answered and she said, "Hi, it's me," in a sing-song voice like they were the best of friends, and he hadn't just sent her a lawyer's letter ordering her to stay away from him and his family. He said nothing and hung up. Another cease and desist was sent, and then a third. But nothing would make her go away. She did not actually think my husband was capable of not wanting to be with her, because, you know, her beauty. Eventually, though, she got pissed that he wasn't giving in. So, she decided to take this rage to the internet. I knew that she was absolutely checking out my social media, but I don't really use it much, so I didn't care. However, she created a fake Twitter account and tweeted, "My husband's name is a fraud," and tagged all his colleagues, friends, investors, and family members. Every single person she could think of to try and ruin his reputation and career. On New Year's Eve, she posted on my Instagram account at exactly 12:01 a.m. "Happy New Year's, Scrud." Social media settings were all put to private. We went to the police, armed with the emails threatening to give her money or she would go to the police, and she was charged with 2 counts of harassment, and a restraining order was put into place. To our shock, the next day after her arrest, our phones were buzzing. This story had made the front page news. It was clearly a slow news day. Her day in court came right before everything with the pandemic happened, and we arrived at the courthouse and sat down. She walked in and we were shocked by her appearance. Actually, shocked is an understatement. She was unrecognizable from her former self. Gone was the statuesque, dazzling blonde. She had apparently shaved her head and was wearing a short, ratty brown wig. She had gained about 80 pounds, give or take, and was now sort of hunched. With her height and new girth, she looked like a linebacker. And to add to her new look, she wore a bulky brown men's overcoat and a scarf tied over her wig like a babushka. My immediate thought was, her outside now matches her inside. But it was her eyes that I had noticed the most. About a year earlier, we had shown a photo of her to our kids so that if she ever approached them, they knew to run. At the time, my son, who was young, commented that she had mean eyes. From the mouth of babes. Maybe it was that she had changed so much physically overall, but her dark eyes had narrowed into deep black slits. As she scanned the courtroom and saw us in court, she would turn around every so often to look back at us and glare. She would then whisper in her lawyer's ear and laugh as if she were having a grand time. She had a pair of big, round, cheap sunglasses that she would put on and take off intermittently. When she addressed the judge, she would put them on, and he had asked her to remove them. We thought that she was putting on a brave face and treating it all like a joke, but we were about to find out that getting arrested wouldn't slow her down. The restraining order didn't seem to faze her at all. If anything, it angered her even more. From then on, every day, night and day, she would post from multiple fake social media accounts, posting photos of myself and of my husband. She would put up my husband's photo with horrible captions that included bad things and comments and captions that I can't mention. And she also would post altered and unflattering photos of myself. She would call me old and ugly, and those are just the G-rated ones. Listen, I'm no beauty queen myself. The name-calling, while obsessive and gross, wasn't what bothered me most. Although I'm not going to lie, seeing hundreds of photos of myself on her fake Twitter account, calling me ugly and obsessively pointing out every single flaw, did succeed in getting me down at times. Why did I keep looking? Because it was like getting a glimpse into her unraveled mind, just in case it was a clue of what she was capable or thinking of doing next. Because it wasn't her insulting posts that fazed me. What bothered me the most were these sinister captions. Keep an eye on your kids because I'll be watching. Or why don't you plant some flowers in your front yard? Or be good to your kids because you never know what could happen. How was your Uber Eats order? She would post pictures of me with an arrow directed to my head, which I perceived to be a gun to my head. She posted pictures of my husband's workplace, which she was not allowed to be within 2 blocks of, in accordance to the restraining order. But the police said that this could be just a picture she took from the internet. Sigh. She posted Agatha Christie quotes like, "Every killer is usually someone you know well," or "Your end is near." Her Twitter profile banner picture was taken from a movie poster and said "Stalker," like she was in on the joke. We called the police again, but they said that there wasn't anything they could do since she didn't explicitly tag us. I took screenshots of everything though. Many of her posts were nonsensical, but most were photos posted of us on this fake account, all altered with ominous captions, but we just couldn't get her to shut it down. I became anxious anytime my kids were outside shooting hoops in the driveway. My elderly mother wouldn't take the baby out in the stroller. She was too scared. It affected all of our lives. Life became dramatic. Ex-beauty queen would taunt us with, "Catch me if you can." She posted close-ups of her dogs, you-know-what, and a piece of her dog's crap with my name beside it, the implication obvious. It bothered me that she now had a dog, since I don't think someone like her was capable of caring for anything living. And then the calls started back up, this time to our home line. Yeah, I know we still have a home phone. She would just say mean things and then hang up, like karma will get you, and then weird chant-like calls as if she were reciting a spell. Sure enough, she posted photos of a pentagram and candles, and some sort of altar in the caption, "Ring, ring." Finally, and I mean finally, the police asked us to come in and give us video statements. We gave them a drive containing thousands of screenshots of posts that she had made. They arrested her again and charged her with 2 more counts of criminal harassment. My husband was angry at this point, but as Mama Bear, I just wanted to get this over with. She mentioned the kids frequently and ominously many times in her online rants, also calling them rude names, which I won't repeat here, because these are the things that upset me the most. The judge also issued a social media ban for her. By the time that she was rearrested for the second time, her fake Twitter account, which was literally mostly insults or references to my family, had 16,000 tweets in about 3 months. She had no followers, so they were just to herself. The inappropriate sites that I had been being tagged in stopped, and things quieted down tremendously. But I still get follower requests that I believe are her. But at this point, we were all on edge. I kid you not. I felt weird walking into my kitchen at night to make a sandwich, feeling creeped out that she was outside watching. I put nothing past her, as nothing is more dangerous than a desperate woman who has nothing to lose, which, by the way, was one of the quotes that she had posted. I don't know what is wrong with her, but I believe from what I've researched that she is a malignant narcissist. Perhaps some other mental issues are at play here, but I can say that she was a terrible person long before she decided to try and make our lives miserable. Just a crazy beauty queen turned stalker. I would love nothing more than to never meet her again. But if going to court helps you stay away from us forever, then bring it. As an aside, I wanted to mention that we heard from a reliable source that after my husband had broke up with her, she had become well known to the police for other reasons. While my husband dodged a bullet regarding her threats to go to the police saying that he had abused her, apparently other men have not been so lucky. Since I can't post pictures, I'll leave you with one of her posts. One that may not make much sense, but to us, it was a statement to let us know that she enjoys this drawn-out court process. Many of her posts are in her native language, so this is translated. Violent women and the cruelest never answer questions. They like to continue the misunderstanding indefinitely, so I seek to contact people only in order to torment them. My cruelty is my last attachment to the world, and my last chic. In December 2018, my ex and I split up after 7 years in a relationship. I was new to the dating game, so I didn't just want to jump back into it. In February, I met a guy at the bar that we regular. The second time that I met him, we exchanged phone numbers. By the end of March, I was feeling pretty comfortable and I invited him to a party at my house. He had stayed after the party and one thing led to another. Well, after it was all said and done, I had a weird vibe. He was too pushy and it really made me uncomfortable, and so I asked him to leave. I planned to never speak to him again. That is until he started to text me from random phone numbers. He would say things like, "Hope you have fun fishing," when I didn't post on any social media that I was going fishing. I hope the movie was good, when I hadn't posted anything online that I was at the movies. He would text me and ask me where in the bar I was at, different bars when I never told anyone or posted where we were going. We had no mutual friends, so he was following me. The final straw was when my friends took me to Washington, D.C. for my 25th birthday celebration, and we bar hopped all over the city. Around 2:30 in the morning, we came out of the last bar that we were at and decided to get cookies across the street. As we were coming out of the cookie shop, guess who pops up? You guessed it, he does. He goes, "I hope blank and blank and blank were fun. I wanted to say hi earlier since you haven't been replying to my messages, but I didn't want to freak you out." I was terrified. My friend's husband thankfully stepped in and called him out and threatened to call the cops. I changed my phone number and moved. Thankfully, I haven't heard from him since. Update. After all the comments saying that I should still reach out to the police, and that he could still be stalking me, I decided that it was probably best to do that. I contacted my local police, and they advised me to contact the police where I had previously lived. I did so, and I still live close enough that I went on Tuesday to file the paperwork for a restraining order. Thankfully, I know his full name and his place of employment so that they will be able to locate him. I provided all the text messages and screenshots that I have, and now we will wait for him to be served. It'll only be a temporary 15-day restraining order. It will be extended because our local courthouse docket is on a staggered schedule due to the virus. So, once we've been given a court date, we will go. I was told by the sheriff that it shouldn't be an issue getting a judge to approve a restraining order for 2 years with all the evidence that I have, and the testimony from my friends who had witnessed all these events. Thank you all so much for the advice. I live in a city with a public transportation system. They have been extremely short-staffed, and more often than not, you have to call to make sure that the bus is even coming. On weekdays, during business hours, the public transit operator will order a lift for you to get to work if your bus isn't showing up or if they're short a driver. Tuesday, I'm at the bus stop after checking multiple times if my bus is coming, only to find out that it wasn't. They ordered me a lift, and this nice older gentleman was my driver. We had casual conversation, and he started to ask some personal questions. I'm a bartender, and I'm super friendly already, so I don't think his questions were ill-intentioned. I told him that I'm not married and that I'm pretty much a loner. I basically go to work and go home and spend time with family. He then says, "I'd marry you in a heartbeat." Again, I'm just thinking that he's being funny or nice. I asked him to drop me at the downtown grocery so I could pick up some things that I needed for work. When we stopped, he said that he was only joking and that he's married and he has a son my age. And he asked if I was interested in maybe meeting him. Since I have a terrible track record, I figured it wouldn't hurt meeting someone out of my circle and comfort zone. So I gave the man my number and we parted ways. The next morning, he texted me and asked if I needed a ride to work. I told him that he didn't have to do that and that I was sure my bus was running. He said that it would be his pleasure and that he would pick me up at my house at 3 p.m. And then about an hour later, he asked if I wanted to have lunch with him before work. I told him that I was busy and that I couldn't do that. And he said, "Okay, see you at 3. He shows up at 3 and he lets me know that he's outside. While I'm finishing getting my things together, I open the door and he's starting to walk up my stairs to my house. I told him that I was ready and that we could head downtown. When I get in the back seat, he turns around and says that he has a confession. He told me from the time that I took off my mask, his heart danced like a butterfly. He said that he hasn't been able to stop thinking about me since the day before, and that he would love to spend some time with me, and that he would pay me for my time if I spent a day with him. That's when I started to feel really uncomfortable. The whole ride was making me cringe, but I know when you're in a situation like that with a predator, playing nice is safer than freaking out. He continued on the entire ride, about how he loved me at first sight and wanted to make me his Lebanese queen. As we got closer to downtown, I started to feel relief. He dropped me off at my hotel and said, "See you tomorrow." That evening at work, I checked my phone after a bust happy hour, and he had texted me a couple of times. He sent a picture of the hotel and said that he would wait for me to get off work to give me a ride. I told him that I already had one, but thank you anyways. Come Thursday morning, I'm out running errands with my mom and sister. He texts me and asks how early he can pick me up because he can't stop thinking about me. I asked him to please stop and that I was with family. He continues to text me all day and evening, begging to see me, telling me his heart is aching to see his Lebanese queen. I just kept saying, "Please stop." Friday morning, crap hit the fan. He tells me that he loves me no matter what. He said that I told my wife about you and that I'm in love with you and I want a divorce. I told him please don't do that and that it wasn't right to treat his wife that way. He said that it wasn't my fault. They were drifting apart anyways. Then he said that I'm picking you up for dinner at 5:30. And I'm not taking no for an answer. I ignored the messages during the day and just went about my off day. Around 5:25, my video doorbell rings and he's standing on my porch for at least 15 minutes. I told him that I wasn't home and that he should leave. He continues to text me and to beg to come pick me up from my parents. I was home the whole time but was too scared to let him know that. I eventually called the non-emergency police station, but he had already left by the time I got through. I filed a general report, but technically they can't do anything unless he's standing on my porch threatening me. They advised me to report through Lyft, and that's what I did. I haven't heard anything since then, but that stuff was just creepy as heck. I've been working for an independent hotel for just over 4 years now. We're the #1 rated hotel in our city, and proud of it. I mostly work in housekeeping, but have done some time at the front desk as well. I love my job and have always said that my bosses are great. Now, being a housekeeper, I've seen some things. I've seen a room where someone snuck in their dog, kitten, and chicken. We don't allow pets. I once had a room that I was cleaning as a stayover that had tripods set up all around the bed, professional camera equipment cases, an adult-sized pacifier, on-site and XL-sized children's diapers. The 2 people that were in that room were in their early 20s. I even had a room once that we had to call the cops on for a raid because we had found meth. They found a lot of drugs and guns in that room. But today is the first time that I've ever actually felt scared to be in a guest room. As I'm working in a room that's already been vacated, a man in the next room over catches me at my supply cart. He's said to be staying for several days and he tells me, "You can go ahead and clean my room now. I'm going down for breakfast." Well, excellent. I love getting my stayovers done early on. It makes things easier for the people working laundry the sooner we get the dirty laundry down to them. And so I pop over into his room, opening it up and propping the door open with a stopper like we always do. The first thing I notice is that he has around 20 prescription bottles lined up on one of the 2 beds, along with insulin and needles. I'm nosy, I'll admit it, and I wanted to see what he was on. Oddly, it was only 2 different types of medication for all 20 bottles. About 2/3 were a diabetes medication, and the rest were a cholesterol medication. It's a little weird that he has so many bottles of these same meds, but whatever. I go to make the bed and see that some of the bedding had been stained inside, knowing not I'll have to change all the bedding now instead of just being able to turn down the sheets and blanket. So I leave the room, closing it behind me to go get the linens that I need, and then head right back to the room. I prop the door open again, and head to set the clean linens on the desk chair, when I see out of the corner of my eye 2 notes sitting on the TV armoire. It wouldn't mean anything except I caught the word "kill" scrawled on it. I dropped the linens and took a closer look. What I read on the first note made my blood run cold. "You don't have to forgive her, you just can't kill her. You are here to take money and alcohol away from you. Getting over having to kill her and you can safely leave." My heart was pounding. My eyes went to the second note, which had just looked like a to-do list at first glance, but in the end, it made my stomach churn. Spray and wash, apply for Medicare, insubordination. The soul is healed by being with children. Bank card follow-up, inheritance, savings. Kauai Pop, 1050. Matt, Montana. There will be a day of reckoning. Did you tell Mom what I said? How did Bev get my address? It was too much. I quickly snapped pictures of them on my phone so I could show my boss why I would not clean his room. I left the room quickly, closing it up behind me. As the door closes, I turn and see the man just 10 feet away from me, coming back to his room. My heart is in my throat, but I manage to smile and tell him, "I need more supplies, but I'll be back to your room in a bit." I take off straight for the elevator, having noticed that our maintenance man was waiting for the slow transport. In a hushed tone, I tell him what I found and he sees that I'm shaken, not a normal state for me. He rides down with me, and I go straight to my boss and tell her that for the first time in all these years, I am not comfortable being in a guest room. I show her the pictures, and her face is still and pale. She goes to the front desk and asks our general manager for a minute of her time and brings her into the office to show her. She agreed. This was not a safe situation and took our maintenance man with her to go inform the man that he had 1 hour to get his belongings and leave the hotel, and that he was not welcome back. I spent a few minutes in the laundry room trying to calm down, and then my boss went back up with me to the floor until the man was officially out of the hotel. I don't know who Bev is. I don't know who the woman is that he didn't feel he needed to forgive. But man in room 422, I hope he never come back to the hotel. This happened in 2008 when I was 9 years old. I lived in a townhome community where each road had two sides of homes. In between the backs of houses, there was a back road with alleyways that went in between each building section. I lived on the edge of one of these, and my townhome was on one of the alleyways. I lived on one street, and across the back road on the opposite side lived an elderly woman whose name I don't even know. I'm not sure what her situation was, but for whatever reason, she never liked me specifically. She was creepy, and spray painted all of her windows so no one could see in her house. However, that never stopped her from sometimes staring out her bedroom window directly at mine, and keeping it open at night to shine a red strobe light into my room across the way. She used to yell how she hated us. I was in the 4th grade, and on a particular January morning, I had unfortunately missed the bus. My dad sent me outside to get in the car so that he could drive me, and he said that he would follow me out soon after. As I was walking to my dad's car, she came out of the alleyway next to my house, slowly, with a gigantic kitchen knife behind her back. She raised it and started running after me. I was faster than her, so I was able to avoid her and was able to get into the house. She walked and stood on the neighbor's porch across the way and stared at my house. I was terrified. My dad ran out and yelled at her, and she said she wanted to get rid of us stupid kids. My parents called the police, but the police sent her home and had an ambulance pick her up later. My parents went to some kind of court meeting about it, but I don't really know the details. I didn't see her again after that, until 1 year later. I don't remember the day, but it had snowed that morning, so I was going to run out of the front door and play in the snow. I opened the door to see her standing on the porch, but looking out towards the road. I panicked, closed, and locked the door. I ran up to my parents' room and told them what had happened, and we saw her walk off the porch up the street. I never saw her again after that. My family has since moved far away from there, but people I know say that she still lives there, and her windows are still these same spray-painted windows. Though it doesn't affect me as much as it used to, I still don't like being around knives. This happened about 5 years ago. I was around 16 or 17, and I always enjoyed walking. I would spend at least an hour a day walking the roads around where I lived. One day I was out, doing my normal route, walking down my street that my house was on, taking a right out to the main street, and following it until I got to the end. There, I would cross the crosswalk and retrace my steps to go back home. On this particular day, I was about 20 feet from where I would leave the main road on my journey back home. I had my headphones in, blasting music as always, which can be a bad habit as I'm a young female that has been put in some sketchy situations while going for my walks. Men chasing me, following me, etc. but since it was daylight and the roads were pretty busy, I figured that I was safe. But man, was I ever off with that assumption. As I was about to pass the entrance of a side street before leaving this main road, a black Ford F-150 pulled up. He stopped and gestures for me to walk in front of him, so I do so. I was about to go on my merry way when I barely heard someone trying to talk to me. I turned on my music, taking out my headphones as I looked to see the man in the black Ford, still stopped at the entrance of the side road. I looked at him puzzled, trying to figure out if he was talking to me. I pointed at myself and he grinned, nodding. "What's a beautiful girl like you doing out here?" he asked. I laughed awkwardly. Walking," I replied, seeing as the answer should have been obvious. "It's a beautiful day for that," he commented, just seeming to make small talk. "Yeah," I stated before going to turn around and continue my route home. "Wait," the man called. I stopped and turned around, just trying to be polite. Even though the encounter was odd, I didn't see too many red flags. The man then went off saying things such as, "You're so beautiful. You have a really nice body. This hot weather is nice for a hot girl." I grew incredibly uncomfortable at this point, seeing as this man had to be in his middle 40s. He had a bit of a receding hairline with black hair, a nose with a protruding bridge, blue eyes that were surrounded by slight wrinkles, and he was dressed in a dress shirt. So I instantly brought up my age, saying, "I'm a minor." There had been multiple times that I had been mistaken for being older than I was, and I was hoping saying this would get this fully grown adult man to back off. But he didn't. "No, that's okay. Come on, sweetheart, get in the truck." That's when I started panicking. Red flags shooting up everywhere. Stranger danger. I laughed nervously, looking at the cars around me to see if anyone else was noticing what was happening. Nobody did. No, that's fine. My house isn't far." "No, really. Get in the truck, I'll bring you home." "No." "Come on, just get in here with me," he called as I turned and started walking away. I was hoping that he would just drive off somewhere, but he didn't. Instead, he drove extremely slow, following me, complimenting me, and trying to pressure me to get into his truck. I thought fast of multiple options for different scenarios, but I chose on a simple one. I pulled up my phone while still walking, and I lifted it up to my ear, pretending to loudly answer a phone call. "Hey Dad, yeah, no, I'm just on the street that I was on. I'll be home in about 10 minutes. I stopped pretending to listen to a reply. "Oh, you're outside waiting for me. Awesome. Yeah, we can do that when we get back. Love you." After he heard me say that, he took off, tires screeching. I ran back home and made it back within about 6 minutes, actually calling my dad on the way, who had made a call to the police, who showed up shortly after and took my statement and description. It turns out, there was a man on the loose in my area who was exposing himself to minors and trying to pick them up for bad things. But they never actually found out who exactly it was. This summer, I decided to pick up some graveyard shifts at my local full-time job, simply because it pays more and I'm a university student drowning in student debt. About 2 weeks ago, on the rare occasion that I get to sleep during the time the sun is down, at 3:30 to 4 a.m., I was suddenly awoken by a loud sound. Me being half asleep, I honestly didn't know what the sound exactly was. So I chopped it up to one of my neighbors dropping something because I live in an apartment with very thin walls. So I just tried going back to sleep. After about 10 minutes of laying there with my eyes closed, I heard the sound again. But this time I'm pretty much awake, so I recognize what the sound is immediately. Someone was knocking on my window. For context, I'm a single female living alone in a basement suite, so my windows are basically level with the sidewalk. Anyways, obviously I'm freaked out, and I don't know what the heck to do. I don't want to move and make any loud noises so they know that I'm home and I'm just frozen laying in bed. But then I hear the knocking again. I instantly bolt up as my fight or flight kicks in and I run to the front door, which has my keys with my pepper spray on it. The keys clink together and make a noticeable noise, and the knocking starts to get more intense and loud. This is when I realize the window with the screen by my bed is almost all the way open because my cat likes to sit on the edge, and I forgot to close and lock it. I start to freak out, already having major anxiety. I start looking for my phone just in case I need to call the cops, but me being clumsy and shaking from anxiety, I drop the phone on the ground, and whoever is at my window proceeds to slide either his fingernails or a sharp object down the screen. I realize this person's intentions are either to come in or to scare me. So, like an idiot, and not thinking, I run to the window as quickly as I can and slam it shut and lock it, while avoiding looking outside at whoever it was. The knocking stops, and I wait about 30 minutes without hearing anything more. I lay back down and go right back to sleep. The next morning, I honestly couldn't believe that it even happened to me. I start to think that maybe it was all a dream. And so I go outside and investigate, and see an empty beer bottle and a ripped up blanket. I text my only friend that knows where I live and ask them if they were messing with me. They say no, which I figured because they don't drive and live quite far away, and the buses around my house stop running well before 3 a.m. So I called my landlord and told him what happened, and he says to ignore it and that this has happened before, which is really creepy. Anyways, I obviously recognize now that I should have done a lot of things differently and called the police right away. It hasn't happened since, but nonetheless, it was still super terrifying. But I really can't afford to move again, so I really hope that the knocking doesn't come back. A few months ago, I was at 22 and at the local coin laundromat. I went late because I had been studying around 10 p.m. The laundromat is pretty small and closer to the edge of the beach town that I live in. The town is pretty well known for drifters and people experiencing homelessness. Most people are friendly, and there is a lot of drug use, but I've never really felt scared. Everything was fine until I went to move my laundry to a dryer. I was listening to music on my headphones, but not super loudly. Suddenly, I got the feeling that someone was watching me. I can't really explain it. I just felt the presence. I turned around and there was a man standing just a few feet away from me. He was a white guy with pink hair wearing a full face mask, like a ski mask, a hoodie, gloves, and sunglasses, even though it was dark out. The gloves and sunglasses immediately made me feel uncomfortable. I thought maybe that he was a drifter or high, but I didn't really want to be rude. I tried to laugh it off and told him that he surprised me. He immediately started talking. A lot of it was disjointed and just didn't make sense. He was talking about coming up from Brazil to bring his brother money to get a classic car, none of which made much sense. But he would ask me questions and wait for me to respond, so I tried to just play along. I still thought he was probably just high or something, but he was standing between me and the only door. And I started getting this gut feeling that he was blocking the door on purpose, not just accidentally as he talked to me. He was getting closer to me as he talked, and the feeling only got stronger. Logically, something was off, but mostly, I just had this feeling in the pit of my stomach that I needed to leave, and keep him talking until I could. I started to the edge to the side, but he stayed in front of me, and the feeling got more intense. I started to grip my keys in the attack position just in case. He talked more and then he backed off a little, then he took off his backpack, which was a child's unicorn backpack, and set it on a nearby dryer. I looked over to the door for just a second, and when I looked back, he was pulling something that I couldn't see out and holding it to the side, behind him where I couldn't see it. But I did see what was in his backpack. Duct tape. Instantly, it was just like an alarm went off. There was no more worrying about being rude, no more second-guessing myself that he was just off but harmless. It was like this cold, numb dread just washed down over me. I almost felt calm. Like I knew the next steps and I knew that I had to do something. Time seemed to move in slow motion and he turned back to me, not saying anything anymore, and took a step forward. I gripped my keys as tightly as possible and tried to mentally prepare to fight. I remember being afraid that I would move too slow or be too weak, just like in a nightmare. But all of a sudden, the door to the laundromat opened and a woman walked in, barely even looking at us as she went to get her laundry. It was like a scene in a movie. A moment of intensity, just interrupted by something innocuous, and suddenly it was over. He just turned, got his bag, and he left. I was so scared, I just stayed there a minute until I could get my laundry and just go home. I didn't report it. I never knew what to say since nothing had actually happened. But when I think about it, I think the scariest thing is that he left as soon as somebody had walked in. If he was just crazy, it wouldn't have mattered. I think a stranger's laundry timer saved me from something terrible. And because of that, I don't go to the laundromat anymore. I joined a laundry service instead. The extra cost is worth it to never go back. For context, I'm a 26-year-old male and have a larger build. Not fat, but also not muscular, just have a bigger look to me. I've lived an unusual life and have been through many iffy situations with people, so I'm not frightened easily by odd or wacky people. I can also defend myself pretty well in a fight. I live in a city with pretty bad crime and work in a sketchy set of town. Well, not the most crime-filled it, but it's still sketchy and you get shady people once in a while. I'm also a fan of the dark life, so I love walking at night and do not really get scared. I work a second shift job and it is my duty as one of these supervisors to lock the gates after the sun goes down and all the day shift people are gone. Our work is enclosed with a fence that has barbed wire on the top. Just a few days ago, I was walking to close the gate. I was coming from the far side of the parking lot after throwing something away in the dumpster. As I was walking to the gate, I could see a strange man on a bike. It is dark and cold out this time of year at 8 p.m., so I found it odd to see a man that was at least 30 to 40 on a bike. But I carried on as it could just be a man going to work, or leaving work who doesn't have a car. As I continue to walk, I see that he's now doing circles in the road at the end of the little driveway that leads to the fence. Now my guard is up and this is strange to me. As I reach the fence, he has now set down the bike and is looking at me and walking toward me. He is shaking like I have seen many people on drugs do before. I'm still not super worried, as like I said, I have dealt with many shady people before. I close one side of the gate quick and rush to the other, swinging it closed. The gate is locked by a chain and a padlock, so I grab both sides of the chain. But before I can get the padlock in through, the man sticks his hands through the fence and grabs me by the shirt. At this point I yell, "Get the heck off me before I beat you up." As it was, I was holding the fence closed with the chains while he grabbed me and yelled, "I'll kill you." The only thing going through my mind was how I was going to get the upper hand on this dude, and if I should fight him, or wrap the dang chain around his neck. I was fortunate, and a police officer had just turned the block as this was all going down. He flipped his lights on and quickly took the man down and cuffed him. While the man was in his car, he questioned me and got a statement, and I was on my way. So, to the druggie who wanted to attack me, even though I know I'll run into more one way or another, I hope we don't meet again. This happened almost 4 years ago. My parents and my husband were visiting my mom's family in Indianapolis. I used to go all the time as a child, but I wouldn't know my way around. I was drinking a lot because my husband had an emotional affair with his ex that lasted 4 months. She tried to break us up. Honestly, I could write a whole post about how she tried to ruin our relationship. So we saw my family and then went back to the hotel. I was upset, so I said that I was going to smoke. In reality, I was going to the hotel bar. I got multiple double vodka shots with a splash of orange juice, and I was feeling good. The bar was closing, so I asked the bartender where there was another bar, and she told me to go to TGIF's. It was about a 10-minute walk. Remember, this was after 10 p.m. and I was already pretty drunk. I went inside and I got more drinks. I don't remember how I got back outside, but I was smoking and there were people outside in the parking lot with me. Suddenly, I was being dragged into a car. I don't know how long it had been. I was so drunk that I couldn't do anything or even realized how messed up I was. During this time, my husband realized that I was missing and woke up my mom in my parents' room, and he tracked my phone to the TGIF parking lot. My mom and husband got to my phone, but I wasn't there. Then my mom saw this man trying to get me in his car. She got out of the Uber that they were in and started screaming to let me go. And this guy thought that my mom was just a stranger trying to save me. He didn't believe her, and I remember her yelling. I only remember him saying, "How do I know she's your daughter?" and something like that. He had grabbed me, so I had bruises on my arm. My mom threatened to call 911, which I was told later, since I was almost in his car. He let go of me and drove off with his back passenger door wide open. I'm convinced that I would have been taken at the very least. I was unfamiliar with the area. I was drunk, and I barely realized how bad the situation was. I was taken to the hospital, checked in. I was released the next day. I didn't hear about what my mom and my husband saw until we got home, since we were driving home that entire day. I'm a mother of 2 daughters and live out in the country. My husband is a welder and a really outgoing and charismatic guy, which means that he has tons of friends that will periodically stop by to hang out with him. In fact, there are some friends he trusts enough to use the tools in his garage and stay at the house when he isn't home. Well, one late evening he was gone when I heard someone pull into the driveway. We have 2 dogs who were going nuts with barking at the picture window in our living room. I looked out and saw a familiar looking blue blazer, and assumed my husband's friend, Bob, was over to use something from the garage or to wait for my husband to get home. He hadn't knocked on the door, so I figured they had already talked to each other about it. No big deal. But the dogs wouldn't stop barking and growling, which just didn't seem right because they knew Bob. So I looked more closely out the window and realized that there was a man lingering near the garage, but he was not Bob. In fact, I had never seen him before. I decided to take my dogs and go outside to see who he was and what he wanted. He had told me that he lived down the street and that he knew my husband. He was very friendly and began telling me all about how he had to move out of his house because he and his wife were divorcing. He seemed quite familiar with my husband, and even asked about our dog, Pepper, who had passed away a few months prior. Pepper was a very smart and protective dog, and could be scary if he thought harm would come to me or my family. He didn't realize that Pepper had died, and really seemed genuinely apologetic about it. Meanwhile, I noticed that my dog's shadow still hadn't settled down around this guy. He wouldn't let him pet him, and the hair on his back was sticking straight up. And he would intermittently growl during our conversation too. This was really odd for him, and I was pretty confused because this guy seemed really nice. After chatting for a while, he asked for my husband's number so he could call him. That was a red flag for me, because if my husband wanted someone to have his number, he would have given it to them. So I told the man that I would give him a call right then. I called my husband in front of the man, who suddenly looked a little nervous. I explained to my husband that Jim from down the street was at the house to visit him. Immediately, my husband told me to tell Jim to get off our property and to never return. This scared the crap out of me, because like I said, my husband is really friendly and hospitable usually. He told me to make the man leave and he was on his way home. I ended up making up some excuse to Jim. For some reason, I just couldn't say something so mean to him after he had been so friendly and polite to me. And he backed up right away, suddenly quick to leave. My husband arrived home a short time later and explained that Jim was a severe drug addict who had been stealing from all of his neighbors' garages. His wife threw him out of the house because of this, and he's been desperate for cash to support the habit. He was probably scoping out what he could steal from my husband's garage and seeing what obstacles my dogs would be in his way. To think he could have harmed me or my kids, it makes me furious. But he seemed so nice, and I felt like an idiot for not realizing the truth. I've learned my lesson now though. If somebody comes over that I don't know while my husband is out, I just call him right away. Update. My husband told me tonight that Jim was arrested and is currently in jail now. He apparently was caught robbing from my neighbor's garage. Good riddance. I had moved to a new area, and so I was learning my new bus routes and stops to and from uni. I was on my way home late one evening, and as I tapped my card, there was a lady probably in her 60s sitting up front at the seat behind the bus driver. As I got in, she wrinkled her nose up at me. I chalked this up to her maybe being a little old-fashioned, as I was wearing ripped jeans and an AC/DC shirt. But I don't look tough or mean in any way. I was kind of taken aback by her intense reaction, but I soon forgot about it. By the time I pressed the button to call for my stop, the bus driver overshot and missed it, which he realized immediately, and apologized to which I replied, "It's okay, no worries." And he goes to pull over at the next stop further up. The bus was empty at this point, save for a person up in the back and the grumpy one up in the front. As I got up to get off, the older lady turns right around in her chair with the ugliest look and begins to berate me in a loud voice. "Are you stupid? Why would you press that button, you idiot girl? I hope you never drive, you'll kill someone. And you've wasted my time, you idiot." Over and over again. And the bus driver looked back for a second dumbfounded, but he stayed out of it. She had these dagger eyes fixed on me as she just became louder and more angry. And I just ended up avoiding her gaze as I was so confused and intimidated. I was half in shock at how nasty and loud she was being towards me. So when the next stop came, I quickly made for the exit, and all I could say was, "Yeah, okay, cool." She would just lean towards me, almost sticking her face into my shoulder that I felt her brush against me as I walked past. I was freaked out to say the least and darted out the door, and I hear her growl another insult under her voice as the doors close. I hope I never see her again. For the longest time, there was this man that would sit in his garage and watch me. He was an older man and he was very scrawny. He had patchy gray hair and a super gross beard. I never learned his name, so we'll call him Nick. He looked like a Nick to me. I moved into my classic suburban home before I was even born. I've been living here my whole life, and the first memory I have of Nick was when I was 10. He gave me a small two-finger wave as I walked back home after school. I had to see him every day since my bus stop was a few houses down and I walked like a block to get home. My mom said that he'd drop by after I was born, knocked on the door in the middle of the day, and rang the doorbell until somebody answered. My mom finally answered. My 1-year-old brother attached to her leg and newborn me in her arms. She said his face lit up when he saw me. He smiled brightly and asked to hold me. She obviously denied, 'cause who the heck comes to your house to hold your child when you don't even know them in the slightest? She said that he scowled at her before calmly walking back to sit in his garage and smoke a cigar. After my first encounter with Nick, I never stopped seeing him every day after school, every morning before school, and every time I took my dogs out for a walk, every time I peeked out my window at 3 a.m. I swear this guy never slept. I told my brother how much it freaked me out, and he said he was probably on house arrest and that was the only way that he could get out. We learned that wasn't true when he knocked on our door. Small background for this bit. My mom is very weak and she has an autoimmune disease and her legs and feet will go numb randomly. She's doing a lot better now, but this event happened when she was pretty bad. She insisted that she take the dogs out alone and didn't want to argue, so I sat in the living room. After about a minute, I hear a knock. I yell out that the door is unlocked, thinking that it's my mom. But there's a louder knock. I get up and go to the door. I open it and there he is, smiling at me. "Hey hon, your mom fell off the porch and you might want to help her." Nick stayed, giving me goosebumps. His voice was unreal. So raspy and it sounded like he was in the process of choking. He leaves very quickly and I hurry to help my mom off the grass, calling my younger brother to get the 2 dogs inside. I gave her the "I told you so" speech and she grumbled about it for weeks. My younger dog, a pit bull made of 98% muscle, got excited when she saw a bird. She pulled to get the bird and yanked my mom right off the porch. She was standing behind a pot and tripped over it on her way down, making the fall hurt a lot more. She had a black eye, and her legs were scratched up like crazy, and back, the pot of the flowers that she had tripped over was smashed, but she was okay otherwise. Flash forward to my 13th birthday, and my mom's in the hospital, so my dad goes all out, letting me invite a ton of friends over for a sleepover, making us dinner and breakfast, and just letting me have an amazing time. There's a park across from my suburb that I walk over to sometimes. I decided that I wanted to take my friends there to chill before their parents picked them up. The night before, we were looking out the window and giggling about the man. I know it's bad, but he was creepy and we were 13, so they knew he was weird. I told them to ignore him and if he talked to them, but I didn't take my own advice. "Hey, Rosie." He said it so quiet that I barely heard him. My name is Rose and Rosie is a nickname that my grandfather often used. I never told this guy my name, and neither did any of my family members. Hi." I replied and my friends all scowled at me, knowing that I messed up. "How's your mother?" "She's fine." I got to leave before I paused. "How do you know my name?" "You told me, remember?" "No, I don't, because it didn't happen, but I wanted to get away, so I agreed." "Oh, right," I chuckled. Me and my friends scurry off to the park. The next day, there's a box of chocolates sitting on the porch. A note with Rosie and Chicken Scratch writing on top of it. I pick it up and look over at the guy. He waves and I can see that his left hand has disappeared into his pants. Gross. I leave the box out there and I tell my dad. The next morning, me and my dad take our dogs out. No man. I figured that he gave up after he saw me reject his chocolates. A few weeks later, a large family moves into the house that I hadn't seen a trace of the man until yesterday. I'm 15 now, and the woman who lives in the guy's house comes over yesterday. Does a Rosie live here? She asked. I had answered the door, and my heart drops at the nickname from the stranger. Yeah, why? She hands me an envelope with my full name written on it. The guy who lived in the house before us said to give Rosie this on her birthday. It's not Rosie's birthday. I was trying to pretend that I wasn't Rosie. Oh well, I just took a guess. He didn't give us a date. Have a good day. My dad opened the envelope, wearing a mask because, and I quote, what if he filled it with cocaine? The note inside just said, love you, in his writing. Red ink, my favorite color. So old guy that lived on the corner. I don't love you. I never have and I never will. Just an update. The man was arrested for some really bad things. Luckily, none of the photos were of me. Our local news went crazy about it, and last week, our suburb was flooded with news vans and stuff. I'm just glad that he's going to be in prison and not lurking around, looking at other girls. I was a pretty brave person when I was younger. Or maybe I had that sense of invincibility that comes with youth. I had survived some things. A stalker who pursued my sister and I for over a year and a half. 2 house fires. And growing up in a house that I swear to you was haunted. Not in that Disney way either. I'm talking like torture chambers in the basement and strange things going on. Anyway, I suppose looking back, that having been through all of that made me feel a little like either I was sort of invincible, or maybe I just assumed that I had gotten all of the bad stuff out of the way, and nothing else would happen. Whatever it was, I learned to know better. When I was 17, I didn't have a driver's license. In fact, I was 36 before I did. I walked most places, occasionally catching rides with friends and less occasionally hitchhiking. The night in question was one of those seldom seen occasions when I had decided to hitchhike, having worked late and being too exhausted to walk. Now, most of the time when I would hitch a ride, I wouldn't get in the car with a lone man. Only women or rarely men with a wife or girlfriend or kids in the car. This night though, cars were few and far between and it was cold. And really, if I'm being perfectly frank, when he pulled over, I took a good look and figured that I could take him if he tried anything. He was on the slender side and had a strange frailness to him, even though he looked healthy enough. I got into the car after we had agreed on a destination. We traded names and I warmed my fingers in front of the heating vent. He spoke quietly, asking a few questions along the lines of, was I a local and how did I like living here? He said that he had only been here for a couple of months but found it beautiful and hoped that he could find happiness here. That comment struck me as a little odd, but I brushed it off. It began to snow and the road quickly got slippery. So he slowed and kept his eyes straight in the windshield, driving silently. I was okay with that, as small talk was never my forte. About 10 minutes later, I noticed a car near the intersection that we were approaching. It seemed to be sliding, so he said, "Watch out." He immediately hit the gas, shooting through the intersection and burst out with, "Don't ever scream at me." Needless to say, I was taken aback. I said, "Look, this is close enough. Just pull over here and I'll get out." He didn't seem to hear me. Richard, did you hear me? I said you can pull over here and let me out." No response. He just stared straight ahead, driving faster now than he had been since it began to snow. To say that I was scared doesn't seem to cover the depth of the fear that began to arise in me. I didn't know if I should stay quiet or speak, but I was sure not going to yell after his outburst. After about a mile, he began to mumble under his breath. I couldn't quite make out what he was saying, but I assumed he was speaking to me. So I said, "Sorry, I couldn't hear you." He began to speak quietly and rapidly, saying things like, "You're always yelling at me. I've told you time and time again I do not appreciate being yelled at. But do you listen? No. Well, I'm done listening to you now. Do you hear that?" I was at a complete loss. I didn't know what to say in response or if I should say anything at all. I contemplated just jumping out of the car, but I nixed that idea when I realized that the door lock was missing. There was just a silver-lined hole where it should have been. I started to cry and debate with myself about causing an accident by grabbing the wheel and hoping for the best. At least I figured there was a chance I would survive that. When he suddenly looked at me for the first time since I had gotten into the car, he blinked several times, rapidly, and then slowed the car, pulling into a gas station. I waited to see if he would unlock the doors, not wanting to say anything to set him off again. After a minute or two, he quietly said, "I think I'd better let you out here," and he hit the button to open the locks. I wasn't about to hesitate. I jumped out of the car as if it were on fire. I was about to turn and walk into the gas station when he called my name. He looked so sad that I hesitated. He apologized and said that he was sorry if he had frightened me, that he never would have harmed me, and asked if I would be able to get home okay. I said that I would, and I closed the door. He began to pull out of the gas station lot, but stopped suddenly. He just sat there for a couple of moments, his head down. I froze, wondering what the heck was up with him, and was about to run into the station. But he opened his window and he yelled at me, waving something in his hand. My hat. I had left it on his seat. I warily approached his side of the car and he handed it to me, apologizing again. I didn't know what else to say, so I just said, "Thanks." I watched as he drove off, making sure that he was out of sight before moving on, so we wouldn't know which direction I was heading. I decided to go to a friend's instead of my home. As I walked, I went to put my hat back and out fell a piece of paper. Folded into the paper was a $100 bill. The paper said, "I'm sorry. Please take a cab and don't hitchhike anymore tonight." I didn't, in fact. It was the last time that I ever hitched a ride alone. It was about 2007 and I was struggling at the time. I had taken a sublet to get housing and it was in an area filled with bars and college students, so a lot of drunken fights and street harassment. I came home a little late one night and needed to take Lula out. She had one of those leashes that extend, so on her way around the block, I would usually let her stroll down this alley behind our building that she liked to investigate. As she's down the alley, I'm leaning against the building, smoking underneath a streetlight, not really paying much attention, when these two young guys come up. One stood straight in front of me, locked eyes, and wouldn't stop talking. It's like I was momentarily hypnotized. He kept asking if I wanted to party and where I lived. And then I realized that his buddy had slowly moved to my left, to the edge of my vision, and he could easily push me off balance into the alley. Every time I tried to look at his buddy, the smooth talker would move his head to keep my eyes locked on his. He was the distraction for the guy just out of my line of sight. I remember thinking that was pretty clever before it occurred to me that I was in trouble, and that's when Lula trotted over. Now Lula loved everyone. I would joke that she'd be useless in a home invasion, because she would be the most excited about making new friends. She was a shepherd hound pit mix that I had rescued as a puppy after she was found dumped on the side of a highway at about only 6 to 8 weeks old. Probably the runt of the litter, and now at 5 years old, she was maybe 60 pounds, big enough to be a problem if she wanted to. But the problem was usually that she wouldn't get off your lap. This dog immediately put herself between me and these guys, peed on my feet, and started foaming at the mouth while snarling and lunging at them. They jumped back while I just looked at her, shocked. They asked if she was mean at all, and I lied that, yeah, she was. I had just rescued her from an abusive home, and she really hated men, when in reality she probably preferred them. They slowly walked away and Lula kept moving to put herself between me and them, until they were around the corner. And then she just looked at me like, that was fun. Lula was with me for 10 more years after that. She passed peacefully in July 2017 at home in her own bed, being told that she was a good dog. One night, I think in April of last year, I was home alone and craving some potato chips. Fortunately enough, there is a gas station near my mom's house, only about a 5-minute walk away. I struggle with binge eating. I'm in way better control now though. So my parents tried to keep junk food out of the house to prevent me from binging on it. So what I would do was wait for them to go to my brother's hockey practice or a game. And then I would buy snacks from the gas station and hide the garbage in my room. Anyways, as I was walking to the store, it was quite dark outside. I think it was maybe around 8 p.m. Everything went normally. I found a bag of chips, paid for it, and started my walk back home. I live in a suburban neighborhood where the roads are generally not busy at all at this time of night. But to get to the gas station, I had to walk down a busy main road, so cars were a common sight at any time. When I turned onto my mom's street, it connects to the main road, I saw a black van with tinted windows slowly follow behind me. 30 seconds later, it pulled up to me and a man rolled down the window. It was dark out, so I couldn't pick out any of the man's features, but the tone of his voice made him sound like he was maybe in his 30s. I don't remember exactly what he said, but it was something close to this. "Hey there, my dog Chucky ran off and I'm looking for him. He's a golden retriever. Have you seen him?" "No, sorry," I responded. "That's alright. Say, do you want to hop in and help me look for him? It would be a big help." "I'm busy tonight," I lied. This was a very friendly neighborhood, and missing pets were a common occurrence, so I saw nothing wrong with what he was saying. The only reason why I said no was because I was honestly feeling pretty lazy and just wanted to eat some chips. To me, there was nothing off or wrong about the encounter. He thanked me anyways and drove off. I got home a few seconds later, locked the door behind me, and enjoyed some chips in my room. A few days later, I was telling my friends in art class about what had happened, just casually bringing it up. At the time, I still saw nothing wrong with what had happened, until suddenly my one friend who lives in my neighborhood, Kira, seemed to freeze up. "He drove a black van?" she asked. "Yes," I responded. I didn't know what she was getting at. "I saw him the other night and he told me the same thing, about the dog. Except when I said no, he tried to open the door and grab me." That was when the realization sank in. What would have happened if I had agreed to help him? What would my parents do if I had never come home? Kira was on the track team and I wasn't. What would have happened if he had tried to grab me or even chase after me? I was lucky that he didn't. I felt sick and I ended up having a bad rest of the art class. To this day, I never go on walks when it's dark out alone.